Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle something really provocative. We're looking at behavioral science, a field that's been around for 150 years, and asking a pretty wild question. What if it's missing its foundation?
Okay, so let's just jump right in with the central claim from author Martin Grunberg, which is, honestly, a pretty radical idea. He suggests that both psychology and behavioral science have this huge problem right at their very core. And that problem really boils down to this one question. After a century and a half of research, all these theories, and countless studies, is it possible the entire field is, well, incoherent? Now, I know that sounds like a massive charge, maybe even a little insulting, so let's unpack what that actually means. Now, just so we're all on the same page, the source isn't using incoherent to be mean or to say the field is nonsense. It's a technical definition, right from the dictionary. It just means lacking unity or ununified. The argument isn't that the work is bad, but that it's not all connected to a single central idea. And that brings us to this really powerful metaphor at the heart of the whole critique. Think about it. Behavioral science has all these different branches, cognitive science, applied psychology, you name it. But the source asks a really simple question. Where's the trunk? What's the one single foundational theory that connects all of these branches into one unified tree? So to really dig into this idea, the source does something pretty clever. It lays out this satirical guide, 9 tongue-in-cheek tips on how you would purposely keep a field of science from ever becoming unified. It's a brilliant way to point out what the source sees as these massive systemic problems. All right, so check out these first few satirical steps. Step 1, only listen to insiders. This points to the fact that so many big breakthroughs actually come from outsiders. Next up, form a large committee. We all know that's the classic way to get absolutely nothing done. And from there, the advice is to make sure your work is totally incomprehensible to normal people and, most importantly, make sure your models can never actually be tested. It's like a perfect recipe for staying stuck. And, that bit about committees, it's not just a joke. This really happened. Back in 1991, the National Institute of Mental Health got all these top theorists together. The goal was amazing. Create a unified framework for behavior. So what was the big result after a whole week? Zilch. The official outcome was no consensus among theorists. That whole idea of only listening to insiders just flies in the face of how big breakthroughs happen, right? It makes you think of that incredible quote from Albert Einstein, who believed that imagination was actually more important than knowledge, that the ability to see things in a new way is what really matters, not just piling up more of what we already know. And that's exactly what the source points to as the next big satirical no-no. By prioritizing all this dense, complex knowledge from people already in the field, you risk shutting the door on the fresh, imaginative ideas from the outside that could lead to a real breakthrough. And this brings up another one of these satirical rules for failure, making things way too complicated. The philosopher Karl famously said that the whole point of science is the art of systematic oversimplification, taking something complex and making it beautifully simple. The critique here is that sometimes fields can get obsessed with doing the exact opposite. Okay, so if that's the roadmap for how to keep a science confused and stuck, what's the solution? What does the opposite look like? Well, the source proposes an answer that comes from the outside, one that's designed to flip every single one of those rules on its head. So let's look at what that alternative could be. The source puts the typical academic approach side by side with its proposed solution, called the Unified Behavior Model, or UBM. So instead of starting with complex theory, the UBM starts with practice. Instead of being incomprehensible, it's designed to be simple. Instead of being untestable, it's falsifiable. And instead of being inaccessible, it's built for everyone. And look, this UBM isn't just some abstract idea. It's a real model that's trying to be that trunk for the tree. It boils all human behavior down to just 4 core drivers. And get this, it was built over 15 years of practical real-world use, not just in a lab. But here's the most important part. It's published in open science, and it's falsifiable. That means it clearly states, here's how you can test this and prove us wrong. That is the gold standard of real science. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds super academic, right? A bunch of theories, who cares? But the source argues this has huge real-world consequences. Why does having a simple, unified model of our own behavior actually matter to you and me? This really puts it all into perspective. Think about this. Way back in the 1830s, we figured out that the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, should be the foundation of school. Fast forward to today. We teach kids all sorts of complex subjects, we have entire systems for discipline, but we totally skip over teaching the fundamental science of how our own behavior, our habits, and even our discipline actually works. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. And that really gets to the heart of what the source sees as the problem, inaccessibility. The argument is that for 150 years, all these incredible insights about human behavior have been locked away. They're trapped in academic labs, buried in journals nobody can understand, and kept behind the closed doors of therapists' offices. Basically, out of reach for the average person, and especially for young people who could use it most.
So I want to leave you with this final, really powerful question from the source material. What if things were different? What if the ABCs of our own behavior, a simple, practical model for how our minds work, were taught in the 7th grade? What could happen if a teenager actually understood the science behind their own habits, their own character, and their own goals? Just imagine that. What would that world look like? That's the challenge this critique leaves us with.